The sound of shattering glass pierced the morning air just as Everett Quinn stepped onto the wooden boardwalk of Golden, Colorado, his boots still dusty from 3 weeks on the cattle trail. Through the saloon window ahead, a woman's body came flying, landing hard in the mud-soaked street below, her crimson dress spreading around her like spilled wine. Without thinking, Everett rushed forward, his hand extended toward the woman struggling to rise, but she recoiled from his touch as if burned. "Why would you touch me?" Her voice carried equal parts defiance and shame, green eyes blazing up at him from beneath tangled honey-colored hair. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow, mixing with the dirt on her cheek. Everett kept his hand steady, unflinching. "Because you are a person who has fallen, and I am a person who can help you stand." The woman stared at him for a long moment, her breathing ragged. Behind them, the saloon doors swung open and a thick-set man in a garish vest emerged, his face purple with rage. "Get back in here, Helena," the man shouted. "You still owe me for the whiskey you broke." "She does not look like she is in any condition to work right now," Everett said, his tone measured but firm. He did not turn to face the man, keeping his eyes on the woman called Helena. "How much does she owe?" $3, the man spat, "plus damages to my establishment." Everett finally turned, his tall frame casting a shadow over the saloon owner. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out $5, tossing them at the man's feet. "That should cover it, with extra for your trouble." The saloon owner scrambled to collect the coins, his anger deflating like a punctured bladder. He muttered something under his breath and retreated inside, the doors swinging shut behind him. Helena was trying to stand on her own now, refusing to take Everett's still outstretched hand. She made it to her knees before her arms gave out and she collapsed back into the mud with a small cry of pain. "Pride is a fine thing," Everett said gently, "but it does not mend bones or clean wounds. Please let me help you." "You do not understand," she said, her voice breaking. "Men like you do not help women like me without expecting something in return. Then I will be the first to prove you wrong." He moved closer, slow and careful, like approaching a wounded animal. "My name is Everett Quinn, and I expect nothing from you except to allow me to get you somewhere safe where those injuries can be tended." Helena studied his face, searching for the lie she seemed certain must be there. Everett bore her scrutiny patiently. He was 26 years old and had seen enough of the world to know that judgment came far too easily to most folks, and mercy far too rarely. Finally, with a shuddering breath, Helena placed her trembling hand in his. Her palm was small and calloused, her fingers cold despite the warm June morning. Everett pulled her gently to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. "Where can I take you?" he asked. "Nowhere respectable," she replied bitterly. "I work at the saloon. Worked, I suppose, until just now." Everett glanced down the street. "The boarding house on the corner, do you know if they have rooms?" "Mrs. Dalton runs it. She will not take someone like me." "Let me worry about Mrs. Dalton." He offered his arm, and after another moment of hesitation, Helena accepted it, leaning heavily against him as they made their way down the muddy street. People stared as they passed. Women pulled their children closer and whispered behind gloved hands. Men leered and made crude remarks just loud enough to be heard. Helena's face burned with humiliation, but she kept her chin up, her jaw set in determination. Mrs. Dalton was a stout woman with iron-gray hair and shrewd eyes that took in everything at once. She stood in the doorway of her boarding house, arms crossed over her ample bosom, clearly having witnessed the commotion. "Mrs. Dalton," Everett said, tipping his hat, "I need a room for this young lady. She has been injured and requires a safe place to rest and recover." Mrs. Dalton's eyes narrowed. I know what she is, Mr. Quinn. I run a respectable establishment, and I am offering to pay respectable money for respectable lodging, Everett replied evenly. 2 weeks in advance, plus extra for any medical supplies she might need. The landlady's expression flickered. Times were hard and money was money. 3 weeks in advance, she countered. Done. Everett counted out the bills without hesitation. And I trust that, Miss Matthews, Helena whispered. Helena Matthews. I trust that Miss Matthews will be treated with the same courtesy you would extend to any other guest. Mrs. Dalton pocketed the money and stepped aside. Room 4, top of the stairs. I will send my daughter up with water and bandages. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. Everett helped Helena to the bed, where she sat heavily, her shoulders slumping with exhaustion. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, her voice barely audible. Everett removed his hat and held it in his hands. "My mother was widowed young. She did what she had to do to keep me and my sister fed. I remember the men who showed her kindness, and I remember the ones who did not. I swore I would be the former, never the latter." Helena's eyes filled with tears. "I am sorry about your mother. She is still alive, running a small ranch in Wyoming with my sister and her husband, ornery as ever." He smiled slightly. "What I am trying to say is that I understand how quickly circumstances can change a person's fortune. You do not owe me your story, but I want you to know that whatever brought you here, I am not judging you for it." A knock at the door interrupted them. A young woman, presumably Mrs. Dalton's daughter, entered with a basin of water, clean cloths, and a bottle of whiskey. She set them on the washstand without looking at Helena and left quickly. "I should go," Everett said, "but I will check on you tomorrow if you will allow it." Helena looked up at him, and for the first time since their encounter, something other than pain and shame crossed her features. It might have been hope. Why? Because everyone deserves to know that someone in this world cares whether they wake up tomorrow. He placed his hat back on his head and moved toward the door. "Rest well, Miss Matthews." That night, Everett took a room for himself at the smaller boarding house on the other side of town. He lay awake for a long time, thinking about the woman with the green eyes and the defensive anger that barely masked her hurt. He had meant what he said about not judging her, but he also could not deny that something about their brief encounter had lodged itself in his chest like a splinter. The next morning, he bought 2 breakfast plates from the hotel restaurant and brought them to Mrs. Dalton's boarding house. The landlady let him in with a disapproving sniff, but did not stop him from climbing the stairs. He knocked softly on door 4. "Miss Matthews, I brought breakfast." There was a long pause, then the sound of footsteps. The door opened a crack, revealing Helena's face. The cut above her eye had been cleaned and bandaged, but bruises had bloomed overnight, purple and yellow against her pale skin. "You came back," she said, surprised. "I said I would." He held up the plates. "May I come in? The eggs are getting cold." She opened the door wider and stepped back. She had washed and changed into a simple cotton dress that Mrs. Dalton must have provided. Her hair was braided loosely over one shoulder. Without the garish makeup and revealing costume, she looked younger. Everett revised his earlier estimation of her age. She could not be more than 22 or 23. They sat at the small table by the window, and for a while they ate in comfortable silence. Everett noticed that Helena ate slowly, as if savoring every bite, or perhaps as if she was not entirely certain when her next meal might come. "How are your injuries?" he asked finally. "Painful, but I have had worse." She paused, then added, "Thank you for this, for all of it. I still do not understand why, but thank you." "You do not need to understand my reasons to accept the help," Everett said. "But if it eases your mind, I will tell you. I am tired of seeing people suffer when a small act of kindness could make a difference. I have money enough to spare. Why not use it to do some good?" Helena set down her fork. "You are either the kindest man I have ever met or the most naive." "Probably a bit of both," he admitted with a slight smile. "My sister tells me I have a tendency to leap before I look. What brings you to Golden, Mr. Quinn?" "Work, mostly. I have been hired to help drive a herd up from New Mexico. We arrived yesterday, and I have a week before I need to head back south." He paused. "And please call me Everett." "Everett," she repeated, testing the name. "That is a good name, strong. What about you? How did you come to Colorado?" The shutters came down behind her eyes. "That is a long story and not a particularly pleasant one. I have time if you want to tell it." Helena pushed the remainder of her eggs around her plate. For a moment, Everett thought she would refuse, but then she began to speak. "I was born in Missouri on a small farm. My father died when I was 10 and my mother remarried a year later. My stepfather was not a kind man." Her voice was flat, emotionless, as if she were recounting someone else's history. "When I was 17, I ran away. I had a little money, enough to buy passage on a wagon train heading west. I thought I could start over, maybe find work as a seamstress or a teacher." She laughed bitterly. "I was so stupid. The wagon train left me behind in Kansas when I fell ill with fever. By the time I recovered, they were long gone, and I was completely alone with no money and no prospects. A woman in that position has limited options." Everett felt anger rising in his chest, not at Helena but at the world that had forced such impossible choices upon her. "I am sorry. Do not be sorry. I made my choices. I could have stayed and married one of the men in Kansas, but I did not want that life either. So I kept moving west, working in saloons, always thinking that maybe in the next town things would be different." She met his eyes. "They never were." "They could be different here," Everett said quietly. "Could they?" Helena's expression was skeptical. "You have paid for 3 weeks' room, Everett, and I am grateful. But then what? Once you leave town, once the money runs out, I will be right back where I started." "Not if you do not want to be." "What are you suggesting?" Everett had not actually thought that far ahead, but now that the question was posed, ideas began forming. "Can you read and write?" "Yes, well enough." "Can you cook, keep accounts?" "I can cook adequately, and I am decent with numbers." "Why?" "Because there are other kinds of work than what you have been doing. It might not pay as well at first, but it would be honest work, respectable work." Helena shook her head. "No one in this town will hire me for anything respectable. They all know what I am." "Then maybe you need to give them a chance to see what else you can be." Over the next few days, Everett made it his mission to help Helena find legitimate employment. They started with the general store, where the owner's wife needed help with inventory. The woman took one look at Helena and refused before Everett could even finish explaining. The bakery, the laundry, the hotel, all the same story. As soon as Helena was recognized, doors closed in her face. Everett watched her wilt a little more with each rejection, the hope he had seen flickering in her eyes slowly dying. On the 4th day, Everett took a different approach. He went to see the town's doctor, an elderly man named Dr. Fitzgerald who had a reputation for being less judgmental than most. "I need someone to help organize my medical supplies and keep my office clean," Dr. Fitzgerald said, peering at Everett over his spectacles. "But why are you asking on behalf of this young woman instead of having her ask herself?" "Because she has been rejected so many times already that I was hoping to smooth the way first," Everett said honestly. "I know her past, doctor, and I am not asking you to overlook it. I am asking you to look beyond it." Dr. Fitzgerald was quiet for a long moment. "Bring her by tomorrow morning. I will speak with her myself." Everett found Helena sitting by the window in her room, staring out at the street below. When he told her about the potential position with the doctor, she turned to him with such a mixture of hope and fear that it made his heart ache. "What if he takes one look at me and changes his mind?" she asked. "Then we will keep looking," Everett promised. "But I think Dr. Fitzgerald is different from the others." The next morning, Everett accompanied Helena to the doctor's office. Dr. Fitzgerald was a tall, spare man with kind eyes and a neatly trimmed white beard. He invited Helena to sit and spoke with her for nearly an hour, asking about her education, her skills, and yes, her history. Helena answered every question honestly, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. Everett waited outside, pacing the length of the wooden boardwalk until finally the door opened. "Miss Matthews," Dr. Fitzgerald said, "I would like to offer you a trial period of 2 weeks. The work starts at 7 in the morning and ends at 5 in the evening, 6 days a week. I can pay you $12 a month, plus meals while you are working. If we both find the arrangement suitable after 2 weeks, we can discuss making it permanent." Helena's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Dr. Fitzgerald. You will not regret this." "See that I do not," the doctor said, but his tone was gentle. "You start Monday." Outside, Helena turned to Everett, and for the first time since they had met, she smiled. It transformed her entire face, making her look younger and lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. "You do not need to thank me. You are the one who has to do the work. I just helped open a door." "You have done so much more than that." She hesitated, then reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were still cold, but her grip was firm. "You have given me hope that maybe I can be more than what this world has told me I am." Everett squeezed her hand gently. "You always were more than that. You just needed someone to see it." They stood there on the boardwalk, hands clasped, and something shifted between them. It was subtle, barely noticeable, like the first breath of wind before a storm. But Everett felt it, and from the way Helena's eyes widened slightly, he thought she felt it too. The next 3 days passed in a strange, suspended sort of happiness. Everett found himself spending most of his free time with Helena, showing her around Golden, introducing her to the few people in town who might give her a fair chance. They walked along the creek that gave the town its name, the water running clear and cold from the mountain snowmelt. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their pasts, their hopes for the future. Everett told her about growing up in Wyoming, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the freedom of the open range and the satisfaction of honest work. Helena told him about her childhood in Missouri, about the books she had loved to read, about the dreams she had once harbored of seeing the ocean someday. "I never imagined my life would turn out this way," she said one afternoon as they sat by the creek, their feet dangling in the icy water. "When I was a girl, I thought I would marry a farmer, have children, live a quiet life." "You still could," Everett said. "You are young yet. The past does not have to dictate the future." Helena turned to look at him, the afternoon sun turning her hair to gold. "Do you really believe that?" "I do." And he realized he meant it, not just for her sake but for his own. He had been drifting for so long, moving from job to job, town to town, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. But sitting here with Helena, watching the play of light on the water and the soft curve of her smile, he felt something he had not felt in years, the desire to stay. On Saturday evening, Everett's last full day in Golden before he was scheduled to leave, he took Helena to dinner at the hotel restaurant. It was a bold move, and one that earned them stares and whispers from the other diners, but Everett did not care. Helena deserved to be treated like a lady, and he would be damned if he let the town's judgment stop him. They ordered roast beef and potatoes, and Everett splurged on a bottle of wine. Helena looked beautiful in a simple blue dress that Mrs. Dalton had sold to her at cost. She had pinned up her hair and the candlelight caught the gold in it, making it shimmer. "This feels like a dream," Helena said softly, looking around the restaurant. "A few weeks ago, I could not have imagined sitting here like this, with a man who treats me with respect." "You deserve respect," Everett said firmly. "You deserve kindness and dignity and all the good things this world has to offer. You make me want to believe that." She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "I do not want you to leave tomorrow, Everett." The words hung in the air between them. Everett's heart was pounding so hard he was certain everyone in the restaurant could hear it. "I do not want to leave either," he admitted. "But I have an obligation. I gave my word that I would help with the cattle drive." "I know. And I would not ask you to break your word." Helena withdrew her hand, looking down at her plate. "It is just that these past days with you have been the happiest I can remember. I am afraid that once you leave, it will all disappear like smoke." "It will not disappear," Everett promised. "The job with Dr. Fitzgerald is real. The room at Mrs. Dalton's is paid for, and I will be back. Will you?" There was no accusation in her voice, only a quiet sadness. "Men say many things they do not mean. I am not those men." Everett leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "Helena, I will be back. The drive to New Mexico and return should take about 6 weeks. I will be back before the end of August, and when I return, if you will allow it, I would like to continue what we have started here." "What have we started?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Everett took a breath. "I think you know. I have not felt this way about anyone before, and I do not want to lose it. I do not want to lose you." Tears shimmered in Helena's eyes. "You barely know me. I know enough. I know that you are strong and brave and determined to build a better life. I know that you make me laugh and that talking to you is easier than breathing. I know that when I look at you, I see a future I want to be part of." He paused. "And I know that I am falling in love with you." The words were out before he could stop them, raw and honest and terrifying. Helena stared at him, her lips parted in shock. "You cannot mean that," she said finally. "You cannot love someone like me." "I can, and I do." Everett reached across the table and took both her hands in his. "I love you, Helena Matthews. I love your courage and your honesty and the way you refuse to let this world break you, no matter how hard it tries. And if you will give me the chance, I will spend every day proving to you that you are worthy of being loved." Helena was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything right now. Just promise me you will be here when I get back. Promise me you will give us a chance." "I promise," she whispered. "I promise, Everett." They left the restaurant and walked slowly back to Mrs. Dalton's boarding house. At the door, Everett pulled Helena into his arms, holding her close. She fit against him perfectly, her head tucked beneath his chin, her arms wrapped around his waist. "6 weeks," he murmured into her hair. "I will be back in 6 weeks. I will be here," she promised. "I will wait for you." Everett tilted her face up and kissed her, a gentle, tender kiss that spoke of promise and hope and all the tomorrows they might have together. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I love you," Helena said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I did not think I could love anyone, but I love you, Everett Quinn. And I love you." He kissed her again, longer this time, pouring all his feelings into it. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "Write to me, care of the Harrison Ranch in New Mexico. I will write back as often as I can. I will. Every week, I promise." They said their goodbyes with one more lingering kiss, and then Everett forced himself to walk away. He looked back once and saw Helena standing in the doorway, her fingers pressed to her lips, tears on her cheeks but a smile on her face. The next morning, Everett left Golden with the sunrise. His horse pointed south toward New Mexico. The trail would be long and hard, but he carried with him the memory of Helena's smile and the promise of a future worth returning to. The days on the trail blurred together in a haze of dust, heat, and endless miles. Everett worked alongside 15 other men, driving 300 head of cattle across the high desert plains of Colorado and into New Mexico. It was grueling work, starting before dawn and often lasting until well after dark. But in the quiet moments, when the cattle had settled for the night and the other men were asleep, Everett would pull out the letters Helena had sent. She wrote faithfully every week, just as she had promised. Her letters were full of small details about her new life in Golden. She told him about her work with Dr. Fitzgerald, how she was learning to prepare medicines and dress wounds. She wrote about the patients she met, the gradual acceptance she was earning from some of the townsfolk, and the persistent hostility from others. But more than that, she wrote about her feelings for him. Her words were sometimes hesitant, as if she still could not quite believe that what they had was real, but they were always honest. She told him how she thought of him every day, how she counted down the weeks until his return, how he had changed her entire understanding of what her life could be. Everett wrote back whenever he could, his letters shorter but no less heartfelt. He told her about the journey, about the beauty of the landscape and the challenges of the work. But mostly he wrote about how much he missed her, how he replayed their conversations in his mind, how he dreamed of the day he could hold her in his arms again. The weeks crawled by with agonizing slowness. They delivered the cattle to a ranch outside Santa Fe and collected their pay. Everett immediately turned his horse north, declining offers to join other drives or stick around for a few days of rest and entertainment. He had only one destination in mind: Golden, Colorado, and the woman waiting for him there. He pushed hard on the return journey, riding long hours and sleeping rough to save time. What should have taken 3 weeks, he managed in just over 2. On a warm afternoon in late August, dusty and exhausted but burning with anticipation, Everett rode back into Golden. The town looked the same as when he had left it, but somehow different too. Or perhaps it was Everett who had changed. This was no longer just another stop on an endless journey. This was home, or at least it could be, if Helena still wanted him. He went first to his boarding house to wash up and change into clean clothes. Then, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, he walked to Dr. Fitzgerald's office. Through the window, he could see Helena inside, organizing bottles on a shelf. She looked well, healthy and strong, her movements confident and sure. She wore a simple gray dress with a white apron, her hair pulled back in a practical bun. She was humming to herself, a soft, tuneless melody that made Everett smile. He pushed open the door and the bell above it chimed. Helena turned, and when she saw him, her face lit up with such joy that Everett felt his breath catch in his throat. "Everett." She dropped the bottle she was holding and ran to him, throwing herself into his arms with such force that he staggered backward. "You are back. You are really back. I told you I would be," he said, wrapping his arms around her and lifting her off her feet. "I told you, Helena." She was laughing and crying at the same time, her face buried in his shoulder. I know, but part of me still could not believe it. I was so afraid something would happen, that you would change your mind, that this was all too good to be true." "It is true," he murmured. "All of it is true." He set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands, studying her. "You look wonderful. So do you. Thinner, maybe, and more tanned, but wonderful." They might have stood there forever, lost in each other's eyes, if Dr. Fitzgerald had not cleared his throat from the doorway of his examination room. I take it this is the young man you have been pining for these past weeks, Miss Matthews, the doctor asked, his eyes twinkling with amusement. Helena blushed but did not pull away from Everett. Yes, Dr. Fitzgerald. This is Everett Quinn. Everett, this is Dr. Fitzgerald, who was kind enough to give me a chance when no one else would. Everett extended his hand, which the doctor shook firmly. Thank you, sir, for seeing past the town's prejudices. Miss Matthews has proven herself to be an excellent assistant, Dr. Fitzgerald said. Hardworking, intelligent, and compassionate, the patients have taken to her, and she has more than earned her place here. He glanced at Helena with paternal affection. In fact, I was planning to discuss making her position permanent and increasing her wages. Helena gasped. Really, really, you have done good work, my dear, and I would be foolish to let you go. He looked back at Everett, though I suspect Mr. Quinn's return might complicate matters. Not at all, Everett said quickly. I would never ask Helena to give up her position. She has worked too hard for it. I am glad to hear it. Dr. Fitzgerald pulled out his pocket watch. It is nearly 5 o'clock, Miss Matthews. Why do not you finish early today? I am sure you and Mr. Quinn have much to discuss. Helena looked between the doctor and Everett, her expression torn between professional responsibility and personal desire. Are you certain? Quite certain. Go on, off with you both. They did not need to be told twice. Helena quickly removed her apron and collected her shawl, and then she and Everett were outside, walking aimlessly through the streets of Golden, their hands clasped tightly together. Tell me everything, Helena said. Your letters were wonderful, but I want to hear it all in your own voice. So Everett told her about the journey, about the thunderstorms that spooked the cattle and the river crossings that nearly cost them several head. He told her about the other cowboys, the camaraderie and the conflicts, the long nights under the stars. But he also told her how every mile, every day, every moment, he had thought of her and counted down the time until he could return. In turn, Helena shared more details about her new life. She told him how difficult the first week had been, how some patients had refused her care because of her past. But she also told him how Dr. Fitzgerald had stood by her, how slowly but surely she had won over even the most skeptical townsfolk with her dedication and gentle manner. There are still people who will not speak to me, she admitted as they walked along the creek where they had spent so many hours before Everett's departure. Mrs. Henderson crosses the street whenever she sees me coming, and Reverend Thompson has made it clear he does not approve of Dr. Fitzgerald employing someone with my history, but there are others who have been kind. Mrs. Dalton has warmed up considerably, and several of the women whose children I have helped treat have thanked me personally. You are building a new reputation, Everett said proudly. Showing them who you really are. Because of you. You gave me the chance to do that. No, Helena, you did this yourself. I just believed in you. The work, the courage, the determination to change, that was all you. They found their favorite spot by the creek and sat down, watching the water flow past. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. What happens now? Helena asked quietly. You have been back for less than a day, and already I am dreading the moment you have to leave again. Everett had been thinking about this question for the entire journey north. He had a decision to make, one that would change the entire course of his life. But sitting here with Helena, feeling the warmth of her hand in his, he knew it was the right decision. I am not leaving, he said. Helena turned to stare at him. What do you mean? I mean I am staying in Golden. I am done with the wandering life, done with the cattle drives and the endless moving from place to place. I want to settle down, put down roots, build something lasting. He squeezed her hand. I want to build a life with you if you will have me. Everett, Helena's voice broke. You would give up everything for me. I would not be giving up anything. I would be gaining everything that matters. He shifted to face her fully, his expression serious. Helena, these past 6 weeks away from you have been the longest of my life. Every day, I thought about what I wanted my future to look like, and every day the answer was the same. I want to be with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to support your dreams and build new ones together. I want to marry you, Helena, if you will have me. Helena was crying again, tears streaming down her face. Are you asking me to marry you right now? I suppose I am, Everett said with a shaky laugh. I had planned to be more romantic about it, maybe wait a few weeks, court you properly. But I cannot seem to help myself. I love you and I do not want to waste another moment. So yes, I am asking. Helena Matthews, will you marry me? For a long, terrifying moment, Helena just stared at him, tears continuing to fall. Then, suddenly, she was laughing and crying at the same time, nodding so vigorously that her bun came loose and her hair tumbled around her shoulders. Yes, she said through her tears. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes, I will marry you, Everett Quinn. Everett pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and it felt like coming home. The creek burbled beside them, the sun continued its slow descent, and somewhere in the town behind them, life went on. But in that moment, in that perfect, crystalline moment, nothing existed except the two of them and the promise of a future built on love and second chances. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and grinning, practical matters began to intrude on their happiness. Where will we live? Helena asked. And what will you do for work? I make enough to support myself, but not both of us. I have been thinking about that, Everett said. I have savings from the past few years of work, enough to get us started. I was thinking about buying some land outside town, maybe starting a small ranch. Nothing too ambitious at first, just a few horses, maybe some cattle. I could hire out for work until the ranch starts turning a profit. That sounds wonderful, Helena said. But are you certain? Ranching is hard work and there are no guarantees. I am certain. I have been working on other people's ranches for years. It is time I built something of my own. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Something of ours. They talked late into the evening, making plans and dreaming aloud. They would marry as soon as it could be arranged. A small ceremony with Dr. Fitzgerald and Mrs. Dalton as witnesses. Helena would continue working for the doctor as long as he needed her, and Everett would start looking for land to purchase. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Everett found a parcel of land about 2 miles outside Golden, 50 acres with a small creek running through it and good grazing. The price was reasonable, and the owner was willing to include a small, somewhat run-down cabin as part of the deal. While Everett negotiated the purchase and began making repairs to the cabin, Helena prepared for their wedding. It was not easy. Reverend Thompson refused to perform the ceremony, citing Helena's past as making her unfit for the sanctity of marriage. The rejection stung, but Helena held her head high. We do not need his blessing, she told Everett firmly. We have each other, and that is what matters. In the end, they were married by a justice of the peace in a simple ceremony at Dr. Fitzgerald's office. Helena wore a dress of pale yellow that Mrs. Dalton had helped her sew, and Everett wore his best suit. Dr. Fitzgerald gave Helena away, his eyes suspiciously bright, and Mrs. Dalton wept openly throughout the entire proceeding. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the justice said, closing his book. Mr. Quinn, you may kiss your bride. Everett cupped Helena's face in his hands and kissed her tenderly, and when they pulled apart, they were both smiling so widely it almost hurt. Mrs. Quinn, Everett murmured. I like the sound of that. So do I, Helena whispered back. So do I. They celebrated with a small dinner at the hotel, just the four of them: Everett and Helena, Dr. Fitzgerald, and Mrs. Dalton. It was not the grand wedding Helena might have dreamed of as a girl, but it was filled with genuine love and support, and that made it perfect. That night, Everett carried Helena over the threshold of their cabin. It was small and drafty, with gaps in the walls that would need to be chinked before winter, but it was theirs. Everett had spent the past week making it as comfortable as possible, building a proper bed frame, repairing the stove, and even hanging curtains at the windows. "It is not much," he said, suddenly nervous, "but I promise I will make it better. I will build you a proper house with glass windows and a real floor," and Helena silenced him with a kiss. "It is perfect," she said when they finally broke apart. "It is ours, and that makes it perfect." They made love for the first time that night, gentle and tender, learning each other's bodies with patience and care. Helena had been with men before, but never like this, never with love and respect and the promise of forever. When Everett held her afterwards, stroking her hair as she lay with her head on his chest, she felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Are you all right?" Everett asked, concern in his voice. "I am more than all right," Helena said, her voice thick with emotion. "I am happy, Everett. Truly, completely happy. I never thought I could feel this way." "Neither did I," he admitted. "But I am so glad I do. I am so glad I found you. You saved me," Helena whispered. "No, darling, we saved each other." The first months of their marriage were not easy. Everett worked from sunrise to sunset, repairing the cabin, clearing land, building fences. Helena continued her work with Dr. Fitzgerald during the day and came home each evening to cook dinner and help with whatever tasks she could manage. Money was tight. There were weeks when they lived on little more than beans and cornbread, putting every spare penny toward improvements to the ranch. But they were happy, happier than either of them had ever imagined possible. As autumn turned to winter, they chinked the walls and added a second room to the cabin. Everett bought 3 horses and a small herd of cattle, just enough to get started. Helena planted a kitchen garden that she would tend come spring. The people of Golden gradually came to accept their marriage. Some remained hostile, crossing the street to avoid them or whispering behind their hands. But others, particularly those who had seen Helena's dedication and kindness at Dr. Fitzgerald's office, began to warm to her. Mrs. Dalton became one of their staunchest supporters, defending Helena fiercely against anyone who dared speak ill of her. Dr. Fitzgerald attended Sunday dinners at their cabin, becoming almost like a father to them both. By the time spring arrived, bringing with it the smell of fresh earth and new growth, Helena had news that would change their lives forever. "I am with child," she told Everett one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. Everett's eyes widened, and for a moment he could not speak. Then a smile spread across his face, so bright and joyful that Helena felt her own heart swell in response. "Are you certain?" he asked. "Dr. Fitzgerald confirmed it yesterday. He says the baby should come in late October or early November." Everett pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "A baby," he murmured. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Helena asked, suddenly uncertain. "I know we did not plan for this so soon, and money is still tight. I am thrilled," Everett interrupted. "Helena, this is the best news you could have given me. We will make it work. We always do." The pregnancy was not easy. Helena continued working for Dr. Fitzgerald through her 5th month, but eventually the work became too strenuous. She left her position with reluctance, though the doctor promised her she could return once the baby was old enough. Everett took on extra work to make up for the lost income, hiring himself out to neighboring ranches for haying and calving season. He was gone long hours, but he always came home to Helena, always made sure she had everything she needed. As summer gave way to fall, Helena grew large with their child. She spent her days preparing for the baby's arrival, sewing tiny clothes and knitting blankets, turning the second room of their cabin into a nursery. On a cold November morning, as the first snow began to fall, Helena went into labor. Everett rode frantically to town to fetch Dr. Fitzgerald, and the old doctor came immediately, his bag in hand. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours. Everett paced outside the cabin for most of it, listening to Helena's cries of pain and feeling utterly helpless. When Dr. Fitzgerald finally emerged, exhausted but smiling, Everett nearly collapsed with relief. "You have a son," the doctor said. "A healthy, strong boy with an impressive set of lungs." Everett rushed inside to find Helena propped up in bed, exhausted and pale but radiant with joy. In her arms was a tiny, red-faced infant, wrapped in one of the blankets she had knitted. "Meet your son," Helena said softly as Everett approached. Everett sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. He had never seen anything so small, so perfect, so miraculous. The baby had a shock of dark hair, and when he briefly opened his eyes, they were a deep, indeterminate blue. "He is beautiful," Everett whispered. "You are both beautiful." "What should we name him?" Helena asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Everett knew exactly what felt right. "James," he said. "James Henry Quinn." "James," Helena repeated, testing it out. "I love it." The baby, as if approving of his new name, yawned enormously and then settled into sleep, his tiny fist curled against his mother's chest. Dr. Fitzgerald stayed long enough to ensure both mother and baby were stable, then left with strict instructions for Helena's recovery. Everett spent the next week doing little but staring at his son in wonder, and making sure Helena had everything she needed. The arrival of little James seemed to complete something in their family. He was a good baby, sleeping well and eating heartily, growing plump and strong. Helena recovered quickly from the birth, and soon the cabin was filled with the sounds of a happy, thriving family. As winter settled in around them, Everett and Helena fell into a comfortable routine. Everett tended the animals and kept the cabin warm, while Helena cared for James and managed the household. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, James asleep in a cradle that Everett had built, and talk about their hopes for the future. "I want to expand the herd in the spring," Everett said one night. "We have enough saved now to buy another dozen cattle. In a few years, we could have a real operation going." "That sounds wonderful," Helena said, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically. She was making a new blanket, this one larger for James to grow into. "And I have been thinking about taking in some sewing work. Mrs. Dalton mentioned that several women in town need dresses made, and they would be willing to pay." "You do not have to work if you do not want to," Everett said. "I know caring for James is work enough." "I want to," Helena insisted. "I like having something to contribute, and sewing is something I can do while watching the baby." "As long as you do not overdo it," Everett said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "You and James are my priority always." The years that followed were full of hard work but also deep contentment. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. Everett proved to have a gift for breeding horses, and soon people from as far as Denver were coming to buy his stock. Helena's sewing business flourished, and she eventually hired 2 women from town to help with the overflow of orders. James grew from a baby into a curious, energetic toddler, then into a bright, inquisitive boy. When he was 3, Helena became pregnant again, and the following spring she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Ann. 2 years later, another son arrived whom they called Thomas. The cabin, once so small, expanded to accommodate their growing family. Everett added more rooms, built a proper barn, and even constructed a separate workshop for Helena's sewing business. What had started as a rundown shack on 50 acres became a thriving homestead, known throughout the region for its quality livestock and the skill of its seamstress. But more than the material success, what Everett and Helena built was a family filled with love and acceptance. They taught their children the value of hard work and honesty, but also the importance of compassion and looking beyond a person's past to see their potential. James, Sarah, and Thomas grew up knowing their mother's story, though they only learned the full truth when they were old enough to understand. Helena never hid her past from them, believing that honesty was the foundation of trust. She told them how she had once been lost and alone, how their father had offered her his hand when she had fallen, and how that single act of kindness had changed everything. "Your father saw me when I could not see myself," she told them one evening, years later, when they gathered around the fireplace on a winter night. "He showed me that no matter what mistakes we have made, no matter what the world says about us, we always have the power to choose who we will become." The children listened with rapt attention, and even though they had heard variations of the story before, it never lost its power. "I am glad Papa helped you," little Sarah said, climbing into her mother's lap. "Otherwise we would not be here." "That is exactly right," Helena said, pressing a kiss to her daughter's hair. Everett, watching from across the room, felt his chest tighten with emotion. Even after all these years, he sometimes could not believe how blessed he was. The woman who had once recoiled from his touch, who had asked him why he would touch someone like her, was now the center of his world, the mother of his children, his partner in all things. Life was not without its challenges. There were harsh winters when they lost livestock, and dry summers when the crops failed. There were illnesses and injuries, setbacks and disappointments. But through it all, Everett and Helena faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing year. The people of Golden, who had once scorned Helena, came to respect and admire her. She became known not just as a talented seamstress, but as a woman of compassion and integrity. When a fire destroyed the home of a family on the outskirts of town, Helena organized a fundraising effort and opened her own home to the displaced family. When a fever swept through the region, she worked alongside Dr. Fitzgerald to nurse the sick, despite the danger to herself. Slowly, inexorably, Helena's past faded into exactly that, the past. It no longer defined her. She was Mrs. Quinn, the rancher's wife, the skilled seamstress, the devoted mother, the woman who could always be counted on to help a neighbor in need. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Everett took Helena into town for a celebratory dinner at the hotel. It was the same place where he had taken her on that fateful evening before leaving for New Mexico, when he had first told her he loved her. They sat at the same table, and Everett ordered the same meal, roast beef and potatoes with a bottle of wine. "You remember the last time we sat here?" Helena asked, her eyes twinkling. "I remember thinking I had never seen anyone more beautiful in my entire life," Everett said. "And I remember being terrified that I would lose you." "You never had to be afraid of that," Helena said softly. "From the moment you offered me your hand in that muddy street, from the moment you looked at me and saw a person worth saving, I was yours." "We saved each other," Everett reminded her, echoing the words he had spoken on their wedding night. "I was drifting before I met you, Helena. I had no purpose, no direction. You gave me a reason to stop running and start building." Helena reached across the table and took his hand, the same gesture he had made all those years ago. "We have built something wonderful, have we not?" We have, Everett agreed. A home, a family, a life worth living. I could not ask for anything more. Neither could I. Helena squeezed his hand. I love you, Everett Quinn. Today, tomorrow, and for all the days we have left. And I love you, Helena Quinn, always and forever. They raised their glasses in a toast to the past that had brought them together, to the present they had built, and to the future that still lay ahead. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. James grew into a responsible young man who loved working the ranch with his father. Sarah developed her mother's talent for sewing and also showed a keen interest in the horses. Thomas, the youngest, was the dreamer of the family, always with his nose in a book, talking about one day becoming a lawyer. When Dr. Fitzgerald finally retired, he sold his practice to a younger doctor but insisted on staying in Golden. He remained a frequent visitor to the Quinn ranch, doting on the children as if they were his own grandchildren. Mrs. Dalton, too, became like family, teaching Sarah to bake and regaling the children with stories from her youth. Everett and Helena grew older, silver threading through their hair, lines appearing on their faces. But their love remained as strong as ever, a constant in a changing world. One evening, when the children were all grown and beginning to build lives of their own, Everett and Helena sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the land they had worked so hard to build. "You ever think about that day?" Helena asked quietly. "The day you found me in the street, sometimes," Everett admitted, "though it feels like a lifetime ago." "It was a lifetime ago, in a way," Helena mused. "I was a completely different person then." "Were you?" Everett turned to look at her. "I think you were always the woman you are now. You just needed the chance to show it." Helena leaned her head against his shoulder. "You gave me that chance. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Everett corrected gently. "That is what love does, Helena. It sees the best in us and helps us become it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to deepening purple. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear James calling the cattle in for the night, and the sound of Sarah's laughter as she played with her younger cousins. "We have had a good life, have we not?" Helena said. "The best life," Everett agreed. "And it is not over yet. We have years ahead of us still, years to watch our grandchildren grow, years to enjoy the fruits of our labor. Years to love each other," Helena added, "that most of all." As darkness fell, they went inside, hand in hand, just as they had done every night for the past 20 years. The house was full of warmth and light, the smells of dinner cooking, the sounds of family. This was what they had built together, a home in every sense of the word. A place of safety and love, where past mistakes did not define you, where second chances were possible, where a man could offer his hand to a fallen woman and change both their lives forever. Helena often thought back to that moment in the muddy street when she had looked up at Everett's outstretched hand and asked, "Why would you touch me?" At the time, she had been so broken, so convinced of her own worthlessness, that the simple act of human kindness had seemed incomprehensible. Now, surrounded by the life they had created, she understood. Everett had touched her because he saw what she could not see in herself: worth, potential, the possibility of redemption. He had looked past the surface, past the judgment of society, past even Helena's own self-loathing, and seen the woman she truly was. And in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift imaginable: the chance to become that woman, to rise from the mud and build a life of dignity and purpose. As the years wore on, their love story became something of a legend in Golden. Young couples would point to Everett and Helena as proof that true love could overcome any obstacle, that compassion and second chances could transform lives. When their grandchildren asked how they had fallen in love, Everett and Helena would tell them the truth. That love had not been instant or easy, but it had been real. It had been built on a foundation of respect and kindness, nurtured through hard work and dedication, and strengthened by the trials they had faced together. James married a woman from Denver and took over the running of the ranch. Sarah married the new schoolteacher and opened a dress shop in town. Thomas went east to study law, just as he had always dreamed, though he promised to return to Colorado once he had established himself. Through it all, Everett and Helena remained the heart of the family, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They watched with pride as their children created their own families, as their grandchildren filled the house with noise and laughter. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There was a feast with all their favorite foods, music and dancing, speeches and toasts. As the evening wore on and the younger children were put to bed, Everett stood and tapped his glass for attention. 25 years ago, he began, I met a woman in the worst moment of her life. She had been cast out, judged harshly by a world that saw only her mistakes and not her potential. When I offered her my hand, she asked me why I would touch her. At the time, I did not have a good answer. I just knew it was the right thing to do. He looked at Helena, who was watching him with tears in her eyes. But now, after a quarter-century of marriage, I can answer that question properly. I touched her because, from the very first moment, some part of me recognized that she was meant to be mine, just as I was meant to be hers. I touched her because she was not truly fallen, just waiting for someone to help her stand. And I touched her because I could not imagine a world where I walked past and did nothing. He crossed to Helena and took her hand, pulling her gently to her feet. You have made me the happiest man alive, Helena Quinn. You have given me children and grandchildren, a home and a purpose. But more than that, you have given me love, pure and true and unwavering. And I want you to know that if I had it all to do over again, I would not change a single thing. Helena was crying openly now, as were many of the gathered family members. Oh, Everett, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You changed my life that day in the street. You saw me when I was invisible, valued me when I felt worthless. You loved me when I did not know how to love myself. Everything good in my life, everything I am today, started with you. They kissed to thunderous applause from their family, and as they pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. The party continued late into the night, but eventually the guests departed, the grandchildren were carried off to bed, and Everett and Helena found themselves alone once more, sitting on their porch in the familiar darkness. 25 years, Helena mused. Where did the time go? I do not know, Everett said, but I am grateful for every moment of it. Even the hard times, especially the hard times, they taught us what we are capable of, showed us the strength of our love. Helena leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, just as he had done countless times before. Above them, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called to its mate. I used to dream of escaping my life, Helena said quietly. Of running away to somewhere no one knew me, starting over completely fresh. But now I realize that was never the answer. The answer was not running from my past, but learning to make peace with it, to let it be part of my story without letting it define me. You are so much more than your past, Everett said. You always were. Because you believed in me enough for both of us until I could believe in myself. They sat in silence for a while longer, each lost in their own thoughts, their own memories. Then Helena spoke again. Do you know what I am most grateful for, Everett? What is that? That I was in that street on that particular day, at that particular moment, so that when I fell, you would be there to offer me your hand. She turned to look up at him, her eyes shining in the moonlight. "Because you were not just offering to help me stand. You were offering me a future, a life, a love I never dreamed possible, and I am so very glad I took it." "As am I, my darling," Everett said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "As am I." The years continued their steady march forward. Everett and Helena grew old together, their steps slower but their devotion unchanged. They saw Thomas graduate from law school and return to Colorado to open a practice in Denver. They welcomed more grandchildren, each one a unique blessing. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, mourned losses and rejoiced in victories. Through it all, their love remained the constant, the unshakable foundation upon which everything else rested. They bickered occasionally, as all couples do, but their arguments never lasted long. They had weathered too many storms together to let small disagreements drive them apart. When Everett's hair turned completely white and his hands grew gnarled with arthritis, Helena was there to help him with the tasks that had once been so easy. When Helena's eyesight began to fail, and she could no longer sew as she once had, Everett was there to read to her and describe the sunsets she could no longer see clearly. They took care of each other with the same tenderness and devotion they had always shown, and their children and grandchildren learned from their example what true partnership looked like. One warm summer evening, when they were both well into their 70s, Everett and Helena sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The ranch was quieter now, run primarily by James and his sons, but it was still home, still the place where their story had truly begun. "Do you ever regret it?" Helena asked suddenly. Everett looked at her in surprise. "Regret what? Choosing me. Staying in Golden instead of continuing your wandering life. Building this life instead of the one you might have had." Everett was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. "Helena, do you know what my life was like before I met you? I was alone. Oh, I had friends and acquaintances, people I worked with and drank with and played cards with. But I was fundamentally alone, drifting from place to place with no real purpose beyond the next job, the next adventure." He reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "You gave me purpose. You gave me a reason to put down roots, to build instead of just passing through. Our children, our grandchildren, this ranch, this community, none of it would exist if not for you. So no, Helena, I have never regretted choosing you, not for a single moment in over 50 years of marriage." 50 years, Helena breathed. "How did we get so old?" "Very slowly and then all at once," Everett said with a smile. "But I would not trade a single day of it. Neither would I." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands as the sun set over the mountains they had called home for so long. The world had changed dramatically since that day in the muddy street of Golden. The wild west of their youth had been tamed, the frontier pushed back. Colorado had achieved statehood, towns had grown into cities, and the 20th century had brought changes neither of them could have imagined. But through it all, their love had remained constant, a touchstone in a changing world. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Everett helped Helena to her feet, and they made their way inside, hand in hand, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring together. They lived several more years in contentment, surrounded by the love of their family. When the end came for Everett, it was peaceful. He passed away in his sleep one winter night, with Helena beside him, holding his hand just as she had held it through all the years of their marriage. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people from all over Colorado, a testament to the man Everett had been and the life he had lived. Helena stood at the graveside, supported by her children, and spoke of the man who had changed her life with a single act of kindness. "He saw me when I was invisible," she said, her voice steady despite her grief. He valued me when the world said I was worthless. He loved me when I did not love myself. And in doing so, he taught me that we are all worthy of love, all deserving of second chances, all capable of becoming more than our past mistakes. She paused, tears streaming down her weathered face. The day Everett offered me his hand, I asked him why he would touch me. If he were here now, I think he would say it was because he could not imagine doing anything else. That is who he was. A man who helped because it was right, who loved without condition, who saw the best in people and helped them see it in themselves. Helena lived for 3 more years after Everett's passing. She spent her time with her children and grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather, keeping his memory alive. She spoke often of that day in the street, of the moment that had changed everything, wanting to ensure that future generations understood the power of compassion and the importance of looking beyond surface judgments. When her time finally came, Helena passed peacefully in her sleep, a small smile on her face. Her children, sorting through her belongings, found a worn piece of paper tucked into her Bible. On it, in Everett's distinctive handwriting, were the words he had spoken to her that very first day. "Because you are a person who has fallen, and I am a person who can help you stand." Beneath it, in Helena's shakier script, she had added, "And in helping me stand, you taught me to walk, to run, to soar. Thank you, my love, for seeing me. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. I will find you again in whatever comes next." They buried her next to Everett, and at the headstone, their story was commemorated simply. Everett Quinn, 1858–1933, Helena Matthews Quinn, 1860–1936, partners in life, united in love. Together forever, their ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants, and the town of Golden, Colorado grew and prospered. But the story of Everett and Helena lived on, passed down through generations as a reminder that love can triumph over judgment, that compassion can change lives, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do is offer our hand to someone who has fallen and help them stand. Years turned into decades, and the 20th century gave way to the 21st. The world changed beyond recognition, but in Golden, Colorado, the story of the cowboy who offered his hand to a fallen woman remained a cherished piece of local history. School children learned about it, couples retold it on anniversaries, and every time someone chose kindness over judgment, compassion over condemnation, the spirit of Everett and Helena lived on. Because that is the true measure of a great love story. Not just that it happened, but that it continues to inspire, to teach, to remind us all of what is possible when we choose to see the humanity in each other, when we offer our hand to those who have fallen, when we dare to love without reservation or judgment. Everett and Helena's story began with a question: "Why would you touch me?" And it was answered with a lifetime of love, built on the simple truth that every person, no matter their past, deserves to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. Their legacy was not just the ranch they built or the children they raised, but the example they set. That redemption is possible, that love can heal, and that sometimes the most profound journey begins with a single act of kindness in a muddy street. And so their story ends not with sadness but with celebration. A celebration of a life well lived, a love well earned, and a future made brighter by the simple choice, made long ago on a June morning in 1884, to extend a hand and see not what someone had been, but what they could become.